It's a bit unusual for me to speak about images because I'm more linked normally with texts. I try to do the effort to force myself to avoid a bit the text and then to focus on the pictures, on the images. And so it will be a presentation which is also, I would say there will be more questions than answers sometimes, but it's also a way to present you a topic and to have your interpretation of the images as philosophers. So I will be very happy to have your feedback and own interpretation. So maybe I will start with a bit of contextualization because I don't know if everybody knows quite well this work, which is a kind of encyclopedia before the traditional, let's say, French encyclopedias, which was written originally in Latin in the 13th century by a certain Bartholomaeus Anglicus, Bartholomew of England, which was a Franciscan friar. And so we know just a little about his life. We know that he traveled to Paris, probably from England to Paris in the 20s, and then in Magdeburg in Saxony in 1231. And his major work is this compilation, De proprietatibus rerum, on the properties of the things, which was ended during the 40s, let's say. It was very, very popular. We can assume that from the number of Latin manuscripts which are extant, more than 200. This also, the calculation can be a bit different depending on if we consider entire manuscripts or partly manuscripts with just a part of the text, because it has many books, many sections. And the objective, the general objective of that kind of compilation in the Middle Ages is to give a kind of reflect, a kind of mirror of the order of the creation made by God, because we can say that it's impossible to contemplate God himself directly. And so we need to have this mirror that we can contemplate and we can reflect on. This book was mainly read by other friars or other preachers, essentially, because you can take a lot of moralizations from the content of the encyclopedia. So it's not a book for philosophers. I mean, it's a kind of philosophy for the no philosophers. So it's a bit different from what we had until now in this meeting. And so the book is divided into, let's say, 19 different sections. Yes. About the immaterial world, it starts, and then it goes to the human with the corporeal nature, to the macrocosm, and then to the microcosm, following the order of the four elements. So if I... like this. So this is a kind of map that we can build from the contents. So you see a few sections about God, angels, and human soul for the immaterial world. And then about the human body's first section on humours and complexions, let's say the general organization of the human body. And then anatomy, this means all kind of chapter from the head to the foot, just descriptions, the ages and that kind of conditions which also have an impact on your health, if you work, food, sex, ages. And then the theory of the diseases, human disease. And then another part of macrocosm and microcosm, macrocosm with celestial bodies and the question of time. And what will be maybe the more interesting for us today is the 10th book on matter and form, and then the four elements. And it starts with fire, and then it continues with the properties of air, with birds, meteorology, with the properties of water, with the seas, and the properties of the earth with landscapes, countries, and geography, minerals. and vegetals and terrestrial animals. And then a last section, which is a bit unusual, about the accidents, so how colors happen to be in the world, how the odors, states, and so on.
It's all written by him?
Yes, we can assume, yeah, but maybe with other contributors, but it's not so big as the compilation of Vincent of Beauvais, for example, the Dominican compiler, who had a lot of helpers in his project. Bartholomew the Englishman, well, let's say it's like 100 pages, so it's already a long book, of course, but it's more, the size is more reasonable, let's say so. And then this book has a big success, was very successful in the Middle Ages, also into vernacular languages, because it was translated. Well, we have, of course, a bit less manuscripts, but from the 14th century even, we have different languages which are concerned. Italian, Anglo-Norman, I don't know how we say that in English, Occitan language, Castilian translation, Dutch, and of course, French translation by a certain Jean Corbechon at the end of the 14th century in the court of the King Charles V. And we have at least 46 manuscripts of the text in the French translation. And with the difference regarding the Latin, we don't have so many illustrations in the Latin text, apart from a few exceptions. In the French translation, it's much more frequent. We have 33 manuscripts with many miniatures, sometimes really frequent in the manuscript, like in this book, BnF French manuscripts 9140, that I will speak a bit more later, which, well, all those manuscripts are written and commanded, ordered by aristocracy. It was to a certain Jean Dumas, an important person of the court of Louis XI. We have the name of the miniaturist, of the painter, Évrard d'Espinck, who was from Cologne, but this is not very important for us today. And we also have this very interesting manuscript, this particular case that we will consider a bit more just after that, for the French to 22,532, written around 1460, because we know the date because of the commanditer, which is Tanguy du Châtel, and we can identify him as Tanguy IV. He was a chambellan in the court of Charles VII and Louis XI. So we are in the context of the aristocracy. They are not philosophers, as I told you. And so it's interesting to see how this material, quite precise, has been rendered and transmitted into another context. So the principle of the compilation is to gather, collect all kind of quotes of authorities, among others, of course, Aristotle, for the question that we want to investigate. But also sometimes constraint the African and the medical tradition, which is well represented, and we will speak a bit about it. But I wanted to start with the statues of the miniature itself and the role it can play in the book, inside the book. I gave you here just three, let's say, options, three directions we can reflect on. First of all, it's for us a reflect of how the text has been understood or could be understood. Of course, the painter can base himself on the content, on the French text, but it's not a necessity. Sometimes there are also just indications for the painter, so that he realizes what he has to draw and to paint. So this is also a reflect maybe more of what people before reading the text think the things are like, of course. A second orientation, it helps the reader to understand the content of the text. I'm not sure it's the main one. I would say the third one is the principal one. But of course, the image can help sometimes to understand difficult concepts, although the pictures are not very precise. And I would say the main function is more to help the reader to navigate inside the book, because it's a very long book, and so you have directly to recognize where you are and what will be the topic of your book. And for this reason, the picture is very important, especially in the manuscripts which present a miniature for every chapter, for each chapter, which will be a serious challenge for the miniaturists. And so this also has implication, because if the reader has to recognize the topic before reading the text, it means your image, well, it implies another epistemological value of your image, because it has to represent what the reader has in mind when he thinks, for example, what the form or the matter are like. It's not a surprise. The animals are very present in this illustration program, especially birds. Sometimes the realism is quite exceptional, and we can recognize the animal species with its details, like for the cranes or for birds of prey, for example. And sometimes it's more an aspect, a symbolic aspect, which is on the miniature, like here, you can recognize the ostrich. Well, you can see the picture is not very precise from the biological point of view, I would say, but there is one element on the picture that makes you recognize it is an ostrich, and it's the iron that it has in the mouth, because we thought that the ostrich was able to digest, to eat the iron from Pliny and other ancient sources. And just for the anecdote, Albert the Great reconsidered this thing, and you know it, and he did a kind of experiment, and at the end he says, okay, we tried to give iron to the ostrich and it doesn't work. It only eats small pieces of stones, and that's why we think it can eat iron. But this means, okay, with one miniature, you recognize the ostrich because of this element, which is part of the tradition. And of course, when you have many illuminations, many miniatures for animals, you have a kind of tradition, a transmission of a model, which is not the case for different kind of topics, like for example, for the medicine, for the disease. While it's not the same kind of course, you have also miniatures in medical texts, but the miniaturist here does not have this precise idea of medicine miniatures. And so you have more indications in the margins for the miniaturist, and can construct his own, let's say, illustration program of these medical part, for example, in this French translation of Bartholomaeus Anglicus. It was a serious challenge for the miniaturist to illustrate each chapter. For example, in the last book on the accident, you have a big section on the milk of each animal and the eggs of each animal. Of course, it's not very easy to recognize. An egg is like an egg. And so you have to find solutions to recognize which animal is concerned. And so you can paint also the animal, or there are different kind of methods. But this is quite the same kind of picture all the time. But more interesting point, I think, is how to visualize the abstract concepts, and it's why I selected this topic for this meeting, of course. for example, matter and form. So I have the chance to be well, there are kind of bibliographical resources which are quite important now, Heinz Meyer and Christian Meyer in German, and a bit more recent, Baudouin van den Abel. And so you can find information if you are interested to learn more about it. And you can also go to Alison Stone's book if you want to know more about illustration programs in general in the medieval miniatures. That's very interesting, of course. So we will start with the humours with this manuscript 9140. The depiction is quite well known, I think. You have the four humours, and what is interesting, the picture is beautiful. Well, another function of the miniature, I have not insisted on it, is also the aesthetic value of the miniature. It brings something aesthetical to the volume, of course, that we cannot really evaluate precisely, but it has a clear function also from the aesthetic point of view. So you have the four humours, four persons, and what is interesting here is that you cannot represent something which is like fundamental of the body, that you cannot extract really from the body. And so what you will depict here is four persons which represent the four temperaments. So you can recognize, well, the text does not say who is the blood and who is, for example, the phlegm or the melancholy, but we can guess a bit because of the face, the expression of the face, for example, and maybe the colors of the clothes, but this is not totally sure. You can have that kind of let's say well, association of a color to one humour. I don't know if there is a traditional way with colors. This is a question that I can raise for you, maybe the role of the colors in the representation. But what's clear is we represent the visible result of something which is not extractable, which is just a structural part of the body and that we cannot represent in itself. It's a kind of metonymy or something like that in the illustration. And then let's go to this other manuscript with the systematic program. This is the sens commun, sensus communis, common sense. So you can see the guy shows his head, his mind, to say it's there, probably. And which is interesting too, it's the kind of the wall of castle. You have a kind of picture like in the comics, no, the nowadays comics. So it's nice to see a kind of inventiveness of the miniaturist in this, and then he will evoke the imagination and that kind of stuff. But I will not insist on it. This is imagination and memory, and you see, well, there is nothing really that you can directly recognize. To think that this picture means imagination and memory and sensitive virtue, well, maybe, but it's not really directly visible. So. And then let's go to the 10th book of Jean Corbechon with the form. This is the form. So you have a kind of body, and well, I mean, for me, it was interesting to consider that, okay, the form, you don't have a kind of individuation of the man. So the form is like what makes you human and not something else, probably. But at the same time, it does not make you very particular. You cannot even say, well, probably it's a man, but you don't have the details. So it's just a human body, schematized. And so you can say, okay, this is the form, like if it was just the surroundings, the shape, which is important, and not the content of the body in itself. And of course, the text explains with Aristotle as main source what is the role of the form and the heliomorphism. So form and matter go together to have that kind of plurality of the bodies, of course. So this is for the form. These are the four elements. So it's, well, I'm not an expert, but it's the first time I see the elements represented like this with four lines, stripes, with different colors. So again, the role of the colors, I don't know exactly, but we have again the blue, the red. But of course, if these are the colors that we use for paintings, maybe it does not mean directly that it has a philosophical meaning. I don't think so, but maybe we can guess if we don't read the text for now. Maybe we can guess air and fire are above, and then maybe water and earth. But this is not explained, and I would say it's not very important for the miniaturist. It is also a big change if you represent normally the elements in opposition in a kind of circle or a kind of, let's say, I don't know, a square, I don't know. Here you have just four stripes, so you cannot see which one is opposed to which one. So this is important, although it is in the text, of course. The text explains that water has this quality and is opposed to the other elements, which has this quality and so on. But this is not really depicted on the image, although we can say, okay, there is still this border. So you can pass, for example, if I interpret a bit, from the air, maybe, to the fire with a common quality between both. So maybe we can have this kind of interpretation. It's a kind of flag. I think it has no impact on the colors of the fortalitibus, if I continue the joke with this. Probably not, but I don't know if the colors have importance or not, so that you can interpret maybe later with me. And just to have an eye on the text, so the element is, according to Constantine the African, is a very small and similar part of the body, which is composed of the four elements. This part is very small from our point of view because we cannot perceive it by the sense, of course. This part is the last one in the distinction of the body, and it is also the first in the distinction. It is called simple, not because the elements are simple in themselves. You want to explain that, okay, they are simple not because they are not composed of different parts, but because the parts are similar. So fire is composed only by fiery parts. So it's what he means here. So I continue with the matter and form. So this I cannot really explain very easily. If you have interpretations, so it's the cover, the front cover of the section on matter in another manuscript. You can also have matter in this representation, matter and form, okay, with the living beings, all kinds of living beings with water elements, with earthy elements, air, of course. Fire is not really there, but okay, we can still assume a kind of cosmological interpretation and also an aesthetic point of view for sure. And I will finish with two representation of matter and form with the father, the mother, and the child. This is a clear representation of how it works. And this we have some links inside the text, which explains that matter and form, it gives the example, okay, the father and the son are not the same persons, and so it's due to matter and form. And so this explains the individuation, the plurality, like the son is not exactly similar to his father, and it's a way to explain matter and form. So you have this way, represented this way, always with something above. They are looking to them, and always also with a more broader view with, again, earthy element, of course, watery elements and airy elements. And also this representation, the quality is not perfect, but again, you have matter and form, probably the explanation with the two person at the left, they kissed themselves, so we don't have really the whole scene. We have the dog, and we have also two persons looking to them through the door by curiosity, probably. So curiosity of knowing what is matter and form, of course, not of knowing what's happening there. This is not a curiosity, which is very important to you. So I think it's quite the time to conclude, to have time for the questions. So many questions and many reactions are very welcome, of course, on the role of the picture. And we can go also further in the text if you need. I have the manuscripts on my computer, but I try to force myself not to read it too closely, and to be able to interpret the images and to give you a kind of glimpse on these things. So thank you very much.